Good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon.
I can just welcome you to the meeting this afternoon of the Constitution Ethics Committee. If we can go to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence or declarations of interest? Can the Democratic Services Assistant please report any, please?
No apologies were received.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2, the minutes of the meeting the 26th of September. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the Constitution and Ethics Committee meeting on the 26th of September as an accurate record. Can I ask whether any member disagrees with the accuracy of those minutes?
Splendid.
You got a second chance? No. Right, we'll go for that then. Also, just to make it clear, I did ask for the pecuniary interest there. I presume there weren't any as no one dived in. Thank you very much. So I will sign the minutes in due course. Thank you. I'll go on to item 3, which is the one you've all turned up for with bated breath. Proposed restructure of the Constitution. And Nick, you're dealing on that, are you?
Yeah, thank you,
You're a
Chair.
very lucky man. Do we need binoculars to see you there, or are you okay?
I think so. I feel a bit far away though. Yeah, no, thank you. So this is proposes a restructure of the Constitution following an in-depth review that started in September 2023, which has involved consultation with members, officers, colleagues at other councils who manage their constitutions and constitutional experts. While the review was initially intended to look at rewriting sections of the Constitution, after these initial consultations, it was decided to instead focus on improving the structure and accessibility of the document. So to that end, it's proposed that the Council moves away from the structure set out in the Modular Constitution, which was drawn up to support certain requirements of the Local Government Act 2000, which served a purpose at the time it came out, but is now widely considered to have structural flaws and to have become outdated. And this is increasingly the approach being taken by local authorities, particularly those that have formed in recent years. In reality, the core of the modular constitution is maintained in the new structure. It's more about reorganizing and removing duplication. So even though there's a reduction from, I think, 61 chapters down to 43, the overall length of the document is similar. So, for example, the articles have been removed from the current constitution, but their content has been transferred over to other chapters. The proposed new structure is set out in Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 tracks where everything's moved to in the reorganisation of the content. And the proposed changes to content are set out in paragraphs 2.9 and 2.10 of the report, but I emphasise that we've deliberately avoided proposing changes to the content as part of this review in order to separate the reorganisation and restructure from what will then follow, which is reviews of individual chapters and sections and the actual content within them. So alongside changing how the Constitution is structured, we have changed how it's presented and accessed on the Council's website. And moving forward, it will be embedded within the website itself, rather than appearing as a list of PDFs as it currently does. This improves how it can be navigated, with hyperlinks allowing you to jump from chapter to chapter and move around within the Constitution. And it will enable each chapter to have its own individual permanent URL, which doesn't change when amendments are made to the content. And it reduces the use of PDFs, which have to be downloaded every time you open one, and which don't display well on small devices such as phones. So all these benefits, which may seem relatively minor and inconsequential, together they actually dramatically improve the accessibility and usability of the Constitution, which was the overriding concern identified in the early consultation. And the web content team has been fantastic in supporting this initiative and this innovation, and without them we wouldn't have been able to put this all together. And that's it really. A full version of the Constitution is attached at Appendix 3, and the committee is asked to recommend its approval to full council on 11th of February. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Greatly appreciated. Members, we'll now move on to questions and debate. Has anyone got any questions that they need to ask on this at this moment in time? Councillor Reynolds.
Yes, Chairman. While we're on the Constitution, I'm not sure who's best placed to answer this, so I'll ask the question and you can decide. Two parts. First of all, the status of the Constitution. Is it advisory only? I know some parts are mandatory, but the Constitution as a whole. And the reason I mention this is the second part of my question is referring to para 20.1 concerning members standing to speak when addressing the council. Now, it clearly says that in the Constitution, but that seems to have dropped off in recent years. So where are we on this one? If we've got it in the Constitution, should we do it? If not, should we take it out?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. The Constitution is mandatory. So it's the council's internal rule book. So it's all got to be complied with. If the council doesn't comply with elements of it, then firstly, it makes it unfair because it's how we tell the public how we operate. So we want to do what we say we are doing within our internal rules. And that could result in legal proceedings against the council if the process defect is unfair, has created an unfair result. So that's what the court looks at in relation to that. However, there is flexibility within the rules in terms of standing to speak and things like that. So, for example, where that is within the chairman's gift or the chairperson's gift. For example, if you have someone with a disability, it would be a reasonable adjustment to allow them to remain seated. And I'd also comment on that point. The quality of a member's debating point is unlikely to be affected whether they're sitting or standing, so unlikely to result in an unfair decision just because a member's sitting or standing. So there is some flexibility in the rules of debate. So as you will have seen at Council, Councillor Kindersley has that ability to control the debate within the rules, to allow more time for debate if a particular point is being made, to determine whether something is relevant or not relevant. So within the operation of the procedural rules, there is flexibility to the chairman. But what we normally say is where, for example, say, for example, the access for information rules, which are about publication and transparency of information in advance of committees, we make sure that's stuck to really tightly, because if we're not publishing what we're making decisions about, then that's unfair to the public. So there's some bits which are more important than other bits, and there's some bits that have a bit more flexibility in them. You know, for example, that bit about sitting or standing, because it's not going to affect the outcome of the decision made. Whereas if you didn't have a particular piece of information or a particular piece of information wasn't published, then that could impact the decision. Has that answered the question?
Thank you. It's a very good answer and pretty much as I expected, which is great. Like everybody here, we just want to see smoothly run meetings, and we're fortunate that all of our members are quite reasonable people. But I have been on this council where we had 5 different political groups who were not all reasonable people, and somebody can make a point of order saying the person who's asking a question or speaking is not complying with the Constitution, and that would disrupt the meeting. It's either in there or it's not in there.
Right button. Councillor Howitt.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone. Just on that point, I really like the fact the chair has used his discretion to allow people to stand or sit, irrespective of disability. Actually, I have to say, I think it's a more inclusive approach, and I hope that will be maintained. But I want to deal with the report. In other spheres of life, I know how much, in an era of machine readability and artificial intelligence, the existing PDF-based information is irrelevant and actually obstructive. And so I understand the motivation of the officers to come forward with this, and I support it. I think the world is changing and we have to change with it. My only concern is I don't have the ability to take 200 pages of text we have in front of us and to work out what's been dropped and moved elsewhere and what the phrasing is. And so I find it very, very difficult to evaluate. You know, I absolutely accept in good faith that the officers are restructuring the Constitution, not changing its content. I get that. But I do think I would be grateful between now and the full council to receive the old Constitution with what's gone in with track changes, and the new proposed Constitution with what's in with track changes, so that we can actually see what's different. I think just for transparency's sake and accountability's sake, I hope that request will be heeded.
Got 5 minutes now to compare the two then. Okay, Michelle.
Sorry, just to come in at this point. Just to remind members, there was a working group, and I think Councillor Bulat from your group was actually on that working group. So she has effectively done what you've suggested. So she can provide that degree of reassurance to your group that she knows what's been moved. I think the point that I need to stress, and I think Nick stressed it at the beginning, is we're not changing the content of the Constitution, and I really want to reassure members of that. You know, we're changing the way it's set out. So we, in the future, we will be using the working group to look at changing the actual detail in the Constitution, but at this stage it's the layout that we're focusing on to give us the base in order to go forward. And I think Nick wants to add something to that.
Yeah, thank you. It's just to say that with the amount of changes that have gone into this, it's not, even though it's not changes to the content of what's written, we've taken, for example, an article, and all of that article has been moved into a separate chapter, and so all the numbering has completely changed within that chapter. And so when you apply track changes to that, it's a sort of convoluted mess of track changes, which isn't actually demonstrating. I mean, I understand the point about wanting to see everything that's changed, and we can look at how we could include a track change document, but to have a track changes of absolutely every change would be a very large document, and it would be complicated to understand.
Can I say I fully accept that? I'm not at all interested in seeing where numbers have changed. I'm interested where words have changed, and if that makes it more manageable, I'd be completely satisfied by that. And just to respond to Michelle, it's always nice to be reassured, so I love reassurance, but if we're being asked to vote on it in the full council, I think it's in principle right to be able to read the changes for oneself.
Emma?
Thank you. Just to reiterate once again, it was really important as an issue of trust between members and officers that we absolutely didn't interfere with anything or change anything with the content, because obviously members will want an input and want to be told exactly what that is before anything is done. So that was the fundamental principle around the way we're approaching the review of the Constitution. The working party papers could be made available to all members in advance of any changes being put forward, so members can see exactly what the working party saw and identify those changes in some detail around the structure, which I think might be helpful for members who are concerned about that, because obviously from our point of view, it's important that all members are really comfortable with this change to the structure, and then we can get on with looking at individual items, some of which will have been proposed by members, some of which will be proposed by officers in terms of the detail of the Constitution. So if that would help members, we can make that available to all members in advance of any decisions by full council.
Councillor Howard?
I completely agree about the importance of trust between members and officers, but I've asked for track changes. I've now been asked to see the prior papers. And if there is trust, I'm sure that reasonable request will be agreed to.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we'll make the papers available. If they don't meet your requirements, Councillor Howard, then please let us know.
And do enjoy, because I suspect there'll be about 800 pages now.
Chair, I've asked for track changes. I haven't asked for the prior papers. And so either that request is going to be exceeded or not. And if it's not going to be exceeded, what does that mean for trust between members and officers?
I can see what you're saying there, but you have been told you will be getting the track changes, so I think we're happy with that. Yeah, indeed. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. I do love a section of a document that begins notwithstanding and whose first clause ends with for the avoidance of doubt. And having heard the exchange we've just had, I'm beginning to understand why those phrases were in there and why the task of then revising the content was described earlier in the document as being a delicate one. I do think this is a great piece of work so far. I think that what we've seen in terms of the layout, which is what we're talking about at the moment, not changes to the content of the document, but how it appears on the website and on the page. I think that looks very positive. I like the way that's been done. I like the putting to the forefront how the public can get involved, because I think that's really important and needs to be very much forefronted. I think it's going to be much more usable as a document, and you really need a document you can use. You avoid it most of the time. You carry on your life thing. It's a bit like your insurance document. You know, you carry on your life as if you don't need it, but then one day you do, and you want to make sure that you know where it is and that you understand what it says and that it's in order. This is our kind of procedural insurance document. And I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing so far, and I look forward to seeing what comes forward in terms of the delicate task, notwithstanding and for the avoidance of doubt, of actually addressing the content. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members, please?
Just to agree with Lorna, having read it this morning at 12:30 this morning. Yes. I thought it was nice and easy to read. I did actually highlight some areas which I didn't like and I thought were wrong, but Nick has explained to us all that they're for debate afterwards and to change afterwards. So my list here can be destroyed, but thank you very much, Nick, for a good piece of paper.
I'm sure that cheers us all.
Cheers.
Please.
Thank you very much. I think the 2 points I want to make are firstly to thank very much officers who've been involved with this, particularly Nick, because I think it has been a surprisingly massive piece of work that possibly took everybody by surprise. And secondly, I think also the web team, because they've been instrumental in getting everything in the right place with the right links and the right this and the right that. I have every confidence that, with the exceptions of that are listed in page 8 of the substantive changes, such as dropping the COVID-19 pandemic chapter and so on, I have every confidence that everything is as it should be, and have no hesitation in recommending it to council.
Thank you very much. Any other members want to speak on this? Nick, back to you.
Yeah, just to say in response to Councillor Ambrose Smith that in carrying out the restructure, we've identified a large number of sort of small issues or some, issues which we want to address, but as that wasn't the purpose of the restructure, we've deliberately not. So if you have any issues that you've identified, please do share them with us, because we also have a list that's waiting to be dealt with further down the line.
Pardon me. Okay, we've got a recommendation before us in 3 parts, which I'll take as 3 unless anyone's got any strong objections. Recommend to full council that it approves the proposed restructure of the council's constitution as set out in the report and attached to Appendix 3 of this report. Part B, authorise the monitoring officers to take all steps necessary or incidental to implement the changes of the constitution detailed in this report. And finally, Subject to the recommendation A, note that the Constitution Working Group will assess the impact of the new structure prior to the annual review of the Constitution that will be presented to the Constitution and Ethics Committee in September of this year. So, has anyone got any objections to that, or can we take that as agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. Very much appreciated. Okay. Item 4 now is the review of the terms of reference of the Audit and Accounts Committee. Can I ask Madrig Clayton, Head of Audit and Accounts, Audit and Risk Management rather, to introduce this report? And if I've got your name wrong, my apologies.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. It's a tricky name. So I'm here to present the proposed changes to the terms of reference for the Audit and Accounts Committee, which were endorsed by that committee at their meeting on the 31st of October. The Audit and Accounts Committee had previously carried out a review of effectiveness, and as a result of this, the terms of reference was refreshed and updated. The proposed changes essentially fall into two categories. Firstly, deleting some sections just to reduce duplication, repetition, and to ensure that the terms of reference is a focused summary of the committee's responsibilities. And then secondly, in order to reflect the CIPFA position statement on audit committees in local authorities and police, there is now the inclusion of an expectation that Audit and Accounts Committee members commit to being present for all meetings and avoid the use of substitutes as far as possible. The proposed changes are attached at Appendix 1 to the report. Additions are in bold and deletions are shown as struck through. And we are asking this committee to recommend to full council that it approves the proposed amendments. I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Just some observations. I've got them coloured in. If I'd give you the page number, perhaps you can tell me, explain to me the reasons. Page 377, governance framework, item 3, it's been crossed out. To monitor the effective development and operation of risk management and corporate governance throughout the council. Just ask the question why that's been crossed out.
One moment while I find this in my notes. Thank you. Thank you for the question. So there is a separate section on risk management, which sits below the section on the governance framework. So we felt that the initial part of that requirement around risk management was unnecessary, and then also felt that the remainder of point 3 duplicated the point 6 in the same section regarding corporate governance. So essentially just attempting to reduce that repetition across the board.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If I may, probably the same with this particular item as well. Page 378. Delegated authority to bring to the this is number. Thank you. One less, yes. To bring to thank you very much, Sebastian. To bring to the attention of the Strategy and Resources Performance Committee any issue which may warrant further consideration or review. So shall I scroll down?
So for that one, we felt that essentially it was unnecessary, given that point 8 just above it is to report as appropriate to full council, relevant policy and service committees and the Constitution and Ethics Committee on issues which require their attention or further action. So we felt it wasn't necessary to then have a second section focused solely on strategy, resources and performance.
Joking a little bit, I must agree with you. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you very much, Mairead. In the same spirit, I guess I was slightly taken aback by the deletion of the management and performance of the internal audit function. because as I read it, that isn't quite the same. Well, it isn't the same as internal audit reports. This is more, I assumed, managing the actual function of internal audit rather than what they are producing or what they are auditing.
Thank you. Yes. So for this one, we felt that it duplicated point I within the same section. So this is page 376. So we've proposed the deletion of point 5 to consider reports dealing with the management and performance of the internal audit function. Essentially, that is more or less duplicated by the first point in that section, which is to approve the internal audit strategy and monitor its progress, overseeing the independence, objectivity and performance of the internal audit function and its conformance to professional standards. So I think everything that was picked up by point 5 really is covered by that initial point.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Howard?
This looks all simple for me, and also it's very helpful to see the changes in bold. So thank you. On a related point, we've obviously changed the committee terms of reference to have a strategy, resources and performance committee to put a greater emphasis on performance in that committee's remit. I see that as consistent with the Audit and the Accounts Committee and everything we've heard. I don't see any problem with that. But I just wonder, given the fact that performance is now being given frontline status, has that been taken into account in these changes? And perhaps someone could just give me a bit of an understanding of how, because I think we want both to be effective.
Thank you. Would you like to?
Thank you. So I think that kind of cuts across a few different areas. So the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee would have, I suppose, more of an executive responsibility around performance and ensuring that the authority is performing in the way that we would expect. The Audit and Accounts Committee has more of an assurance function on performance, so ensuring that performance frameworks, etc., are in place, which enable the authority to deliver on its objectives. With respect specifically to these points around internal audit strategy and performance, the new global internal audit standards, which have recently come out from the Institute of Internal Auditors, places quite a lot of requirements on the Audit and Accounts Committee or the Audit Board under the standards to have oversight of the performance of the audit team. So that is also a part of the global standards around internal audit, that the Audit Committee should monitor the performance of that team.
Okay. Any other questions at all on this? Okay. Well, following up, thank you, members. We'll now move on to the recommendation, which is to recommend to the full council that it approves the proposed amendments to the chapter P3B7 Audit and Accounts Committee of the council's constitution attached in appendix 1 of the report. Unless anyone's got any objections to that, we'll take that as read. We're happy with that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, and we're now on to item 5, a review of the complaints received under the Members' Code of Conduct. And I believe, Emma, that's your treat.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, members will be familiar with this report, which just identifies how complaints are being dealt with at the moment. We've had no new complaints since my last report. 2 have been disposed of, paragraph 2.2.1, and 3 are still currently ongoing. So happy to answer as far as I can any questions about those.
Any questions on this at all? We'll stop now while we've got away with that one. Thank you very much. And then item 5 is next then, is the review of the complaints received under the Members' Code of Conduct. Can I ask the Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer to present the report? Is that the one we just done? Oh, sorry, I've read half the page. Ignore that, we've done that. No recommendations to note the contents and then give me a good rest. Thank you. And then the final item then is the agenda plan. Do any members or officers have any comments they wish to make on that? Please.
Whether we know whether we're using the reserve meeting yet.
I think we will use the reserve meeting date as far as we're aware.
The next meeting will be on the 20th of March, and I promise that I won't get up at 4:30 in the morning and be tired by the time we get to this meeting for the next one. Thank you, guys.